Okay, good. So this is me. I am an associate director within the Colliers Healthcare Valuation and Advisory team. So what we said we're going to talk about today is know your numbers. So a little bit of background to us as a team and what we do for people. Split, we're a team of two halves. So we have valuations and advisory and capital markets, specialising in healthcare investments and the cure side of healthcare as well. So that's just information on everything we do as a team, a little bit of run through of our kind of team skills and services. So we'll be talking about numbers today, and I thought it'd be helpful for you to know where our data actually comes from. So last year, 2023, we valued 950 care homes, 57,000 beds, 7.2 billion pounds worth. Now that comprises single assets right through to portfolio valuations and everything in between. So that gives us access to an awful lot of financial data on companies. But we also use some external data sources. I don't know if everybody's aware of Lang & Breeson. Lots of information that they provide. We also subscribe to Carterwood Analytics. Again, huge provider of data, predominantly in the elderly care sector. We talk to other care advisors, other property advisors, and we also look at their publications. So things like the Knight Frank report. It might seem peculiar that we talk about technically the competition, but we do share some advice and some information on the markets. And we also track completed market transactions. So whenever we hear about a transaction that we haven't been involved in either the sale or the valuation side, we talk to the agent concerned and get comparable information so that we can again add to our database of information on care homes. So let's talk about why we need to look at the numbers. There are 4 areas here where we think numbers matter. So we take them one at a time. If you're looking to grow, you need to know how much equity you've got. That will actually impact on what you can afford to buy next, or on the loan amount or rates that you would get from a funder. You need to know how stable your business is. Have some control over it, identify areas of underspend and overspend, and obviously see how that might impact on compliance. Likewise, if you're looking to sell, people are going to go through the business with a fine-tooth comb carrying out their due diligence. So it all makes that much more attractive to them if you've got stability, if you've got control of the numbers, if you know where your business is and how it got there. So business intelligence, identification of issues. You can put certain parameters into your spreadsheets, your expenditure spreadsheets, and have it flag when something is over or below what you think you should spend on that per year. And it helps you make decisions about your business. And last but not least, you have lending covenants, and those lending covenants might actually mean that your bank takes a closer look at your management information and decides that you are leaning towards a breach of your lending covenants if perhaps your numbers are dropping and you don't have a solid plan as to how you're going to recover them. So what we look at, this is a summary of the lines of expenditure we typically see in most companies' P&L accounts. If there's anything there that anybody doesn't know what it is, feel free to shout out. We'll address that. But we think this captures the vast majority of what we see day to day within accounts. So if we look at some examples of these benchmark numbers, We work out, as an example, what a nursing home would spend on provisions per week, what it would spend on insurance, on repairs and renewals. Now, repairs and renewals, when you're talking specialist care, are a completely different set of circumstances. And we don't apply these benchmarks because if you can imagine, if you have a client who is younger, who is physically mobile, and who might have challenging behaviour, and perhaps is displaying that challenging behaviour, their repairs and renewals might be a lot higher. So we, like I say, we apply benchmarks to absolutely every line of the accounts. And as well as looking at overspend, we talked about, if you look at provisions, if somebody is spending £70 a week on food, it's something we look at. It's a question we ask. But likewise, if they're spending £20 a week per person, it's a question we ask. And it's not about saying your numbers have to match these numbers. It's about knowing if these are the benchmarks, if yours is different, why? So it might be you've decided to buy in organic meat from the local butcher. Absolutely fine. That's going to be much more expensive than going wholesale. If you decide you want aperitifs before a meal, as I know a few homes do, within your provisions, you'll actually have a budget for alcohol. It may be that you are lower on those numbers, but it might be because you perhaps run an entirely vegetarian kitchen, in which case we know that that's going to be cheaper to run than one that has fish and meat involved. So it's just about knowing what all of those numbers are, why your business operates the way it does, and being happy with that. So when we're looking at those numbers and those benchmarks, we also look at what kind of property it is. So we know that the tier 2 tertiary stock might have, for example, less efficiency in terms of lighting and heating than one of these super prime homes. And there are some groups that are heading down the ESG route quite strongly. We know that the L&T group, for example, that's based in Yorkshire, has a very firm grip on ESG, and some of their homes are now being built net zero. So we would expect their heating costs to be considerably lower. If they're very new, we would also expect much lower repairs and renewals because it's just being built. So all of these things get taken into account when we're looking at care homes. It's not just a case of these are the numbers. There's a lot of bits of the jigsaw that we pull together. So this financial intelligence, we know it's absolutely key to ensuring those problems are identified as early as possible. And that means dealing with something when it's a niggle rather than an issue, and certainly when it's going to impact compliance. If you want to grow your business, you're going to have to be able to evidence that your business is making money. It is making the right kind of money, because we have averages on EBITDA percentages of turnover for every kind of care home as well. We have average staffing costs. Everything that we can look at has an average. You need to know how you will measure against that. Banks will look at measuring you against that. We certainly will when we carry out a valuation. I will when I come along to appraise it if you're looking to sell it. And essentially, having that control of your numbers really does help your business to thrive. A lot of care homes are surviving. There may be options to improve that, and perhaps looking at your numbers is one way to go about that. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
No? So I'm back in the room. I've stopped sharing now. So I know there's a lot to take in there. There's an awful lot of information, and it would be really, really tempting for everybody to say, what are all the lines and what are all the averages and how do I measure my business? But because we look at the kind of business it is as well, and we look at who the competition is in the area, and we look at what the current trade is, so we'd carry out a current trade analysis. We look at what FMT is, which is fair maintainable trade. So that's a sort of, regardless of who owned that business, what do we think it could do? And somewhere between all of that lies a value. So that's where the valuation team really comes into their own, actually being able to say, well, it's underspending here, it's overspending there. This is typically what it is doing now. This is what it could be doing. And that what it could be doing, that gap between the two figures, that's where you look at making your improvements. That's where you look at saying, okay, so if I would like to sell in 3 years' time, it might seem a little bit premature to start looking at those numbers and preparing, but it really isn't. You might want to get a handle on exactly where your business sits now from an appraisal, so not a formal valuation, just an appraisal. Where does it sit now? Where could it realistically get to? And how can I get it there so that when I go to market with it, I know I've got something that will sell. It will attract interest, and those people that are interested will be able to get funding for it. If you're looking to grow your business, identifying that gap might be quite useful because it can increase your spending power. So, question from Cassie.
Oh, it's Claire, actually, just on Cassie's machine.
Oh, okay.
So you're talking about appraisals, which I think people probably don't seek appraisals at an early enough stage. I think from our experience with the YCA with care providers that want to sell, they get to a point of saying, I've had enough, something's changed, I need to get rid of it, or I need to move on now. So what type of budget would you need to have an appraisal? So say you wanted to check now on the just in case that in a few years' time I might want to. Is it price prohibitive? If you can, no. I mean, I'm not asking for an exact price, but it's sort of a ballpark figure.
It's not. For a short form appraisal, it's £500 plus VAT. And that's a short form appraisal. That's me having a look at over all the numbers, having a look at a quick SWOT analysis, very quick. It's basically, it's called a desktop. And it's not a formal valuation, so you can't rely on it for lending or anything. It's not RICS backed, because once you start down that route, then you are into the thousands, then you're into the formal valuation territory, which definitely has a value. But if it is just that short appraisal, that kind of snapshot of where I am today, that short form appraisal, I think, is a really good way to do it.
And would that give you sort of a form of a roadmap? So would the appraisal say, your business is worth X amount, and almost give you like a step-by-step guide to what you would, because knowing your numbers, you kind of need to know them quite a way in advance. So it would give you a steer as to what you would need to do moving forward if you were moving towards a sale.
So what could happen is, on this short form appraisal, we say this is where you are now. So this is your CTA, your current trade analysis. And that current trade analysis would come out with an EBITDA figure. Does everybody know what EBITDA is before I start speaking in acronyms?
So is that your profit before tax and insurance?
Earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So it's an adjusted net profit. So we work out your current EBITDA and we apply a multiple to that. What we could say is, okay, so then you've got FMT, so the fair maintainable trade. It also has, there's something else called competent operator analysis, which is rather insulting, so we tend not to use it anymore because it suggests that the person running it now isn't competent. So we do CTA and FMT. So we say this could be making more. We think that your wages are out of kilter. We think that your repairs and renewals are probably too low. So we can do a quick kind of, where could you be position for people.
Oh, it could just be a health check, couldn't it? If it brings up things like that, then it could just be a...
Yeah, even things like your care home has had a requires improvement for the last 3 reports. And it's actually a really small thing because we read through the reports, because the content of the report really matters, because we know that requires improvement can be virtually inadequate or virtually good. And we don't exactly, you got to read the report to get that. So we say, actually, if you addressed this, that's likely to move you into good territory. If you could get to good, for example, this is just an example. Even if there's no change in your profit, if you go from requires improvement to good, I will apply a higher multiple figure to that profit. So I could move you from a 5.5 times your profit to a 6.5 or a 7, just from moving to RI to good. So you've created value in your business.
And how does this work, Ali? If you were in, because I think a few of our associates are in the VCSE sector, so they may be charitable organisations or run by trustees.
Yeah.
Obviously, they probably wouldn't be in a position where they're looking to sell, but in terms of giving them a health check, in terms of their knowing their numbers, and is it valuable in that sector, or was this purely for private people that want to sell?
No, it's not all for private. We do work with charities in the third sector. The challenge with some charities is because their drive is not profit. Some of their numbers do look a little unusual compared to the averages, but we know that, so we can still look at charities and give a view as to where some improvements could be made. My view is that charities do still need to make a profit, but what they then do is reinvest that back in to the service. That allows the service to continue to improve. So it's not about profit being bad. It's about not making profit for the shareholders. It's making the right amount of profit to reinvest in the business.
Perfect. Yeah. I think, Rob, did you have a question? I'm going to be quiet now. Sorry about it.
Yeah, Alison, I've got a question about the multiple.
Yes.
Obviously, get the EBITDA times multiple equals the valuation.
Yeah.
And it's quite easy to validate the earnings stream over, 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
How do we validate that the right multiple is being applied to the valuation? I mean, you've just mentioned 5.5 up to 6.5, 7. I've seen multiples up to 10.
Yep.
Is there a science behind assessing what is the correct multiple for our business?
It is, at the end of the day, an opinion, albeit an educated one, but it is an opinion. So it might be that I would apply a 7 multiple to something, and somebody else might say it's an 8. What I would say is, what you need to do is look at comparables. Now, comparables are always historic as well, which creates another difficulty. We're usually at least 3 months behind on comparables. So those are deals that have already transacted. So I would say there is nothing in this market of that type necessarily in that area, or an area that has a similar demographic, a similar profile, that has ever transacted at an 8 for the last 4 or 5 years. So it's highly unlikely that the market will support an 8.
Sure.
So that's how we research our values and our multiples. So we have regular team meetings about what are the latest multiples that we're seeing in the market. So we talk about multiples on operations. We also talk about yields on investments, and we look at what the market's doing. Now, that's not just our work. That's why we talk to the other agents, and we keep a running catalogue of all instructions that we've seen, all transactions, so that we glean that multiple information from as many sources as possible, so that it's as accurate as it can be.
Okay. If you were to come up with an average for the UK at the moment, slap bang in the middle, average,
Can't.
What number would you come up with?
I can't.
Okay.
Because provision is so diverse. So what you would have, that would include a 24-bed converted in Bridlington, but it would also include a 74-bed, all private cinnamon care home in leafy Surrey, and they're at 14. So the multiples really, you cannot average them simply because the stock is so diverse.
Okay.
I wish it were that easy, Rod.
Yeah, certainly. I've got one other question. I don't know whether you're going to come on to this. You talked about percentages of costs against revenue.
Yeah.
Obviously, you had a look at a number of overheads there. What about direct salaries or direct wages?
Yeah, we
what
do.
Sort of percentage would you expect that to be?
We are currently seeing around 55 to 60. If a care home is under those numbers, we really want to understand why. And it's not always a bad story. Sometimes that they have a private fee profile that knocks all the percentages out of kilter.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is heavy use of agency. We do see that. I saw one last week whose staffing costs are 78% of turnover at the moment, and they are a distressed business. So when you add in the non-staff costs, we're not going to have non-staff costs that are very low either, and they're not. Everything adds up to over 100, so we're in a loss-making position.
Okay. Fine, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Just one, in terms of, so say somebody's had an appraisal, they come to you for evaluation. What does that sales route look like? Do you advertise it? Because I think a lot of care providers wouldn't really know how to go about marketing and advertising it. Is that an offering that you have?
Yeah, we do. So I advertise there's two distinct streams to my instructions. One is the insolvency work. That's absolutely open. Everybody knows about it. It has to be because administrators have been appointed. Nothing is confidential. Where it's an operational care home and it's a private sale, which is the vast majority of my work, everything is confidential. So we apply project names and we use regions, and we can even use approximate bed numbers. We use NDAs, so everybody has to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We produce a teaser document that sits in front of the NDA and in front of the actual sales details, so that as much as we can, we control all access to that information, because the last thing we want to do is have the world know that care home's on the market. We don't mass market. We do use buy a care home, but it would be a teaser document that would go on there. It doesn't actually give anybody enough to go on. So it might say care home, Yorkshire. Well, Yorkshire's massive. Approximately 30 beds. EBITDA X, asking price Y, NDA needed, sign here. So we know everybody that's going to get the sales details. You can't just download them. We have an in-house mailing system that we use, but we don't mail everybody on our list. We actually go through this master list and we pick who we think it would suit. So it's a little more matchmaking than just throw it all out there and see who wants it. And we keep a really tight control on who has what. We don't let people just turn up to a viewing. We don't let people contact the owners directly. We never give that information away unless the owner says to us, I'm happy to do that in this instance. So everything is locked down. Anybody else? Well, I thought there'd be lots more questions than this. So, I think what will probably happen is people will have questions afterwards. Absolutely fine. You can put anybody in touch with me that you want to, and I'll be happy to pick those up and answer them. Happy to provide appraisals for people as they need them for that snapshot of where they are. The valuation team works a little differently to me. Obviously, they start doing the formal valuations that have MV 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're a lot more complex as a document. So they start looking into radon searches and mining and all the rest of it. So I don't do any of that. Mine's literally a snapshot of where your business is. So if anybody wants that, do get in touch. Really happy to do that for you. And if there are any other topics from our perspective you think might be useful for us to talk with you about, really happy to put something together and speak to your members.
That's great, thank you, Ali. And are you happy for me to share your details to, there's a few I've noticed that couldn't attend today, so if I share your details to them as well, is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
And I hope everyone's found it useful. We thought quite a good snapshot just over lunch for people to be able to listen to, so thank you for taking your time to do that for these associates. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.